The Old West wasn't just a place of dusty streets and swinging saloon doors. It was a world where hesitation could cost you your life, and instinct mattered more than talk. Out here, the fastest gun didn't always wear a badge, and not every outlaw was on a wanted poster. These were men, and in one case, a woman, who didn't wait for permission to act. When the tension rose and hands drifted too close to a holster, they were already moving. This isn't about who had the best aim or the loudest reputation. This is about the ones who understood that in the West, if you didn't shoot first, you might not get a second chance. From shadowy avengers to saloon enforcers, every name on this list had one thing in common. They made the first move, and it was usually the last one that mattered. Number 1. Wes Harden's Texas Showdown. Wesley Harden grew up in post-Civil War Texas, a place and time where personal survival often depended on being faster and more decisive than the person standing in front of you. From a young age, Harden understood that hesitation could mean death. He didn't grow into violence, he was raised in it. His father was a preacher and school teacher, but that didn't shield young Wes from the rough reality of Reconstruction-era Texas, where former Confederates clashed with Union troops and freed slaves were caught in the middle. For a teenager like Harden, the world outside was less about right and wrong and more about action and consequence. His first recorded killing happened when he was just 15. According to his own account, he shot a black man who had allegedly threatened him. Whether it was self-defense or something darker, that moment started a pattern that would define the rest of his life. Harden wasn't someone who talked his way out of trouble. When he felt danger or even discomfort, his instinct was to go straight for his revolver. And he didn't just carry one. He was known to be skilled with multiple pistols, often firing with both hands. Over time, this reputation followed him from town to town, and instead of avoiding confrontation, it seemed to invite it. People wanted to test him, and most didn't live to tell the story. One of the most well-known incidents occurred when he was 18, involved in a heated card game. Accused of cheating, Harden didn't bother arguing. He simply drew his gun and shot the man dead in the saloon right in front of witnesses. That wasn't bravado, it was calculation. He knew that drawing first gave him control of the situation. This wasn't about hot-headedness. It was about surviving in an environment where threats didn't come with warnings. He lived by a strict personal code that centered around respect, readiness, and eliminating threats before they escalated. By his mid-20s, Harden claimed to have killed over 40 men, though historians believe the real number might be lower. Still, the fact remains that he shot more men than most gunfighters of his era. What set him apart wasn't just his skill with a revolver, but his absolute commitment to being the first to act. Whether in a bar, a poker game, or on horseback, Harden never waited for the other guy to make the first move. In his world, you either shot first or didn't get to shoot at all. Number 2, Luke Short's Dodge City Duels. Luke Short didn't look like the kind of man you'd expect to be one of the most dangerous figures in the Old West. He was relatively small in stature, well-dressed, and often found at the poker table instead of the battlefield. But behind that polished appearance was a man who built his reputation on speed, precision, and a refusal to be intimidated. Born in Arkansas and raised in Texas, Short drifted into the saloon and gambling scene early on, eventually making a name for himself as someone who could read a man across the table and react faster than most could think. By the time he reached Dodge City, Kansas, Short had already developed a reputation as a deadly shot who preferred to act first and explain later. He understood that in the volatile world of cattle drives, whiskey, and high-stakes gambling, waiting for someone else to make the first move could easily turn fatal. Dodge City was a place that attracted both fortune seekers and outlaws, and as saloon owner and gambler, Short operated in the middle of that chaos. He wasn't a lawman in the traditional sense, but he moved in and out of that role when needed, especially when violence threatened his business or reputation. One of the most defining moments in Luke Short's life came in 1883 when tensions between him and local authorities escalated into a public confrontation. He had clashed with the mayor and elements of law enforcement, leading to an attempted removal from the town. Rather than leave quietly, Short returned with support from well-known figures, including Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp, and stood his ground. He wasn't looking for a drawn-out battle. He was there to make it clear that if someone raised a hand against him, they'd have to deal with the consequences immediately. Short's duels weren't flashy exhibitions. When a gunfight broke out, it was over quickly because he didn't hesitate. His most well-known confrontation was with a rival named Jim Courtright in Fort Worth. During a tense face-off, Courtright went for his gun, but Short anticipated it and fired first, ending the fight almost instantly. It was a clear example of how Luke Short operated. Read the signs, trust instinct, and strike before the other man got the chance. He didn't create trouble, but once it found him, he finished it efficiently and without drama. That quiet confidence, paired with deadly accuracy, is what kept him alive and what made him a lasting figure in Western lore. Number 3. John Jones, a.k.a. Texas Jack, the unseen avenger. Unlike the better-known Pinkerton scout who shared his nickname, this version of Texas Jack remains one of the more mysterious and elusive figures tied to frontier justice. His name never made it onto wanted posters, and he rarely showed up in court records, but in certain parts of Texas and New Mexico, ranchers and cowhands passed around stories about a man who appeared without warning and disappeared just as fast. He wasn't a bounty hunter in the traditional sense, nor was he affiliated with law enforcement, but he seemed to work on his own terms, following his own code. If a man was suspected of stealing cattle or betraying a ranching family, there was always the quiet threat that Texas Jack might ride in during the night and deal with it permanently. What made Jack different from other gunmen of the Old West was how little time he gave anyone to react. He wasn't interested in confrontations or standoffs. He didn't trade threats or give the other side a chance to explain themselves. Most who encountered him didn't live long enough to know what hit them. His method was always the same. Observe from a distance, confirm what he needed, then strike with sudden, calculated violence. He didn't talk things out, and there was never a second warning. Whether you were sitting around a fire or standing at the corral, if you were on his list, you were done before your hand touched your belt. One of the more detailed accounts that still circulates among ranchers involves a situation near the Pecos River, where 3 rustlers had been making off with cattle under cover of darkness. A local rancher, having heard rumors that Jack was nearby, simply let the word spread that someone had been stealing from his herd. Not long after, the rustlers were found dead in their campsite at dawn, each shot in quick succession. No one saw who did it, and no one chased after the rider seen leaving that morning. The law didn't intervene, and the community, for the most part, seemed satisfied with the outcome. Texas Jack wasn't motivated by reward money or fame. He had no interest in becoming a legend, which is probably why he became one. People respected what he did because he never acted recklessly. He moved with intent. He chose his targets carefully, and once he made a decision, he carried it out before anyone had time to draw breath. That cold efficiency, paired with his near invisibility, left a lasting impression. He didn't need a reputation. His work spoke for itself, quietly and permanently. Number 4. Pearl Hart, the gunslinger and highwayman. Pearl Hart stands out not just because she was one of the few women to gain notoriety in the violent and male-dominated world of the Old West, but because she managed to step into that world fully armed and unflinching. Born into a middle-class family in Canada and educated in a convent school, she didn't fit the typical image of a frontier outlaw. Yet, by the late 1890s, she had abandoned the expected path and re-emerged in Arizona territory wearing men's clothing, carrying a revolver, and riding alongside her partner Joe Boot on the open road. Her life turned hard, and she met that reality without hesitation or apology. The event that defined her legacy took place in 1899, during one of the last recorded stagecoach robberies in the American Southwest. The plan was straightforward: intercept the coach, disarm the passengers, and get out fast. However, what could have been a tense standoff turned into a sharp display of nerve and readiness. As they held up the stage near Globe, Arizona, one of the passengers reached for a shotgun. Without missing a beat, Pearl reacted before he could raise the weapon. She pulled her Colt 38 and fired a single shot that struck the shotgun directly, disabling it and forcing everyone else to stay still. Her goal wasn't to kill, but to take control, and she achieved that with precision and complete dominance of the moment. What set Pearl apart wasn't just her gender, it was her presence under pressure. She didn't panic, didn't yell, didn't bluff. She simply reacted faster and with better aim than anyone expected. After the robbery, she and Boot were eventually captured, and during her trial, her confidence and defiance made headlines. She openly challenged the courtroom, questioned the justice system, and used the opportunity to speak her mind about inequality and survival. That attitude, combined with her crime, turned her into a figure of both controversy and fascination across the country. Following her release from prison, Pearl disappeared from the public eye. Stories about where she went or how she lived afterward vary, but most agree that she didn't seek fame. She didn't need to. The single act that defined her, drawing and firing with total control under threat, was enough to make her name echo through Old West history. In a time when hesitation meant death and respect was earned by action, Pearl Hart proved that she could match any gunslinger in nerve, speed, and certainty. Number 5. Rowdy Sam Hill's Saloon Surprise. Sam Hill, known locally as Rowdy, not for wild behavior, but for how quickly things got loud when he was around, was one of those men whose reputation never extended far beyond the towns where he worked. But within those towns, his name carried real weight. Unlike more famous gunslingers who wandered across territories chasing outlaws or robbing stagecoaches, Hill stayed close to the bars and gambling halls that made up the social and economic center of many frontier towns. He wasn't chasing headlines or bounties. His job was to keep order, and he did it with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly when a situation is about to turn deadly. Hill spent most of his working years inside saloons where tempers ran high and liquor blurred judgment. Over time, he developed an eye for reading tension, how men leaned, how voices shifted when a hand started to slide too close to a belt. While many hired gunmen relied on intimidation or a visible show of strength, Hill preferred to stay low profile. He stood behind the bar or near the back wall, rarely saying much but watching everything. He didn't make threats or warnings, and he wasn't known for brandishing his weapon. That restraint is what made him especially dangerous. By the time someone realized they were in real trouble, it was already too late to respond. One of the more talked about moments in Hill's life took place in a busy saloon in Kansas, late into the evening after a cattle drive crew had rolled in. Tensions were high, money was on the table, and the air was thick with drink. A loud and angry patron, already 3 drinks past sensible, began harassing the owner of the establishment. Voices were raised, chairs shifted, and before anyone could fully grasp what was about to happen, the man shattered a glass on the bar and made a move toward his coat where he'd hidden a pistol. Hill didn't stand up or yell. He simply leaned forward, quietly said something to draw the man's attention for a half second, and then fired 2 quick shots from under the counter. The entire incident lasted less than 5 seconds. There was no dramatic standoff, no exchange of words or drawn-out threats. Hill acted with clear intent and absolute precision. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He was doing exactly what he was paid to do, and he did it before most of the other patrons even realized what was happening. That kind of control, built on awareness and instinct, was what kept saloons like that one running. People like Hill weren't outlaws, and they weren't heroes either. They were a necessary part of a violent, unpredictable environment, and they understood that the only way to survive was to act before anyone else even decided what they were going to do. Number 6. Big Tom O'Leary's rail yard standoff. Big Tom O'Leary was a name spoken with quiet respect in the dusty rail towns stretching across southern Colorado. Originally from Ireland, he came to the American West not seeking fortune but solid work. He was hired on by a major railroad company, first as a laborer, then as a security man, trusted with guarding high-value shipments, particularly gold being moved between mining camps and city banks. He wasn't flashy, didn't dress like a gambler or lawman, and he rarely raised his voice, but what set him apart was his ability to act immediately and without uncertainty when things turned dangerous. His size and calm presence were enough to make most men think twice. But it was his fast hand and absolute focus that built his reputation. Unlike many figures of the Old West who gained notoriety through public gunfights or showdowns in saloon doorways, O'Leary's story was grounded in the kind of day-to-day tension that came with protecting something valuable. Gold shipments were tempting targets for outlaws, and word of their movements often traveled faster than the trains themselves. Telegraph lines buzzed constantly, and Tom paid close attention to every message. It was during one of these routine shifts that he intercepted a telegraph from a telegraph operator, warning of a group planning to hit a train just before it reached Pueblo. Tom didn't hesitate. He grabbed his revolver and moved fast, covering ground on foot to reach the site before the train did. He positioned himself near a break in the terrain, knowing the outlaws would use it for cover. When the gang arrived and prepared to stage the ambush, Tom didn't waste time yelling or drawing lines in the sand. He stepped out just enough to be seen, locked eyes with the leader, and fired before the man could even get his rifle off his shoulder. 2 rounds hit cleanly, center mass, dropping the man instantly. The others, not expecting resistance so soon and so direct, scattered without firing a shot. There was no prolonged shootout, no dramatic buildup, just a quick, calculated act that stopped the robbery before it could begin. Tom wasn't looking to make a name for himself. He didn't brag about what he did or seek attention from the press. His focus was on the job, and the job was simple. Keep the shipment safe, handle the threat, and do it with enough force and precision that others would think twice before trying again. That mindset, paired with his ability to read a situation and respond without delay, made him one of the most effective and underrated protectors of railroad property during a time when outlaws constantly tested the limits of law and order. Number 7. Jefferson Gunsmoke Jeff. Davis's Desert Duel. Jefferson Davis, better known across the dusty plains as Gunsmoke Jeff, carved out a name for himself not with a badge or an outlaw's record, but through an unshakable presence and a readiness to act before anyone else had the chance. He wasn't a lawman or a known killer drifting from town to town. Instead, he made his living as a cattle drover, moving herds across harsh, unforgiving terrain where water was scarce and tempers ran short. His nickname didn't come from any connection to fame or politics. It was earned the hard way, through speed, finality, and the smoke that lingered in the air after a gunfight was already over. The defining event that etched his name into local legend took place during a brutal stretch of drought in southern New Mexico. 2 rival ranchers had laid claim to the same watering hole, and as tensions rose, they brought their arguments out to the desert, hoping to settle the matter without outside interference. Jeff happened to be nearby, hired to help move cattle through the area, and tried to keep the situation from boiling over. But when it became clear that both men had come prepared to draw, he didn't waste time playing mediator. As both ranchers reached toward their holsters, Jeff fired 2 shots in rapid succession, dropping them both before either could clear leather. Witnesses said the whole thing unfolded so fast it was over before anyone realized what had happened. 2 bodies lying in the dust, guns still in their belts. Later, when asked why he stepped in, Jeff answered plainly that he didn't care to hear grown men cursing each other to death over something that could have been settled differently. His reasoning wasn't about law or morality. It was about avoiding the drawn-out ugliness that he'd seen so many times before. In his world, arguments settled by gunfire didn't need dramatics. They just needed someone who knew when enough had been said. Jeff's reputation spread because of moments like that. He didn't look for trouble, but he didn't tolerate delays when it came to protecting people, livestock, or his own sense of order. He believed that if a man reached for his weapon, he should be ready to face the consequences without complaint. And when Gunsmoke Jeff was around, that moment came faster than most men could prepare for.